historians debate many aspects of the Battle of Marathon, most agree about what happens next: an apocalypse of violence. The armies collide in a horrifying maelstrom of bronze and blood. The battle is so intense that some Greeks report crazed visions of ghost warriors who crash through the lines and cut down men at random. But the reality is just as terrifying. The Persians surge forward and the Athenians are beaten back.
The weak center can't withstand the Persian attack. It's about to break. It's getting pushed back, back, back towards the valley. The hoplite dam is about to burst, and it looks like Athens is doomed.
Miltiades' center is on the brink of collapse, but at the flanks, it's a different story.
The normal tactics for the Persian infantry would have been to put the strongest units in the middle and the weaker units on the wings.
This is because the wings are usually supported by cavalry. Now Miltiades would know this, and it may be why he bolsters his own forces on the flanks.
With the Persian cavalry rendered ineffective by the terrain, the Athenians are able to chop down the weakened Persian flanks. The center of the Athenian line continues to be pushed back, while the flanks hold strong.
And Herodotus tells us that just before the center broke, they were rallied by their officers to find new courage and actually counterattacked. They counterattacked enough to stop the forward movement in the center. And at that point, the heavy phalanxes on the wings, bang, closed in on the side. Took them in the flanks, literally had them in the V, and literally slaughtered them.
In a daring stroke of military brilliance, Miltiades has completely turned the tables on the Persians. The Battle of Marathon has become a Persian bloodbath. While keeping his flanks anchored, the Athenian general Miltiades has pulled the center of his line back, drawing the Persian infantry into a death trap. Hemmed in on three sides, the Persians can't maneuver. They panic.
One of the reasons for their panic probably was something caused by the fog of war, and by something that happens to men in battle no matter how well they are trained or how well you are disciplined. Every now and again, the disease of fear gets into your soul. And when that happens, and panic gets into your ranks, it's done. You can't stop it, no matter how disciplined you are, how controlled you are.
More than 6,000 Persians perish, while the Athenians lose fewer than 200. Among the Athenian dead, however, is Callimachus, whose tie-breaking vote pushed the Athenians into battle.
Some cite Marathon as the first known example of the pincer maneuver, or what's called a double envelopment. But this isn't truly the case because Miltiades only uses one force, so he does not completely envelop the enemy. The Persians still have an avenue of retreat.
And they use it. The Persians race back toward the beach.
Some say the Athenians immediately chased the Persians back to their ships, but this is pretty unlikely since the Athenians would be completely exhausted at this point.
What likely happened is Miltiades and his men rested until they were able to go back on the offensive.
It took a considerable time for the Persians to try to grab what's left, their wounded, their horses, and put them try to get them on the boats. It might have taken, several hours, 8 to 10 hours. At some point, the Greeks were rested, and at some point, they reformed, and now they began, pursuit is too strong a word, they began literally marching towards the beach in order to encourage, let us say, the Persians to leave.
Fighting breaks out again as the Persian rear guard tries to protect the retreat. Athenians butcher them and capture 7 of the fleeting boats.
Herodotus recounts a story where a Greek soldier grabs a boat with his left hand and has it chopped off by the fleeing Persians. Undaunted, he grabs the boat with his right hand. It also gets chopped off. So the Greek soldier bites the boat and tries to hold it on the beach with his teeth. This is the kind of hyperbole that Herodotus is known for.
The Athenians rout the Persian infantry, but the danger isn't over yet. The Persians aren't sailing back to Asia. They're heading straight for Athens. Miltiades sends a Greek messenger from Marathon to Athens with news of the victory.
The Athenian runs the 26 miles from Marathon to Athens, runs into the town square, yells up his hands, Nike, which means victory, and drops dead, probably of a heart attack or a stroke.
And this is where we get the phrase, to run a marathon. 26 miles, the distance from Marathon to Athens. But at the same time that this inaugural race is being run, Miltiades realizes that the fight is not yet over.
Once Miltiades realizes what the Persians are doing, he sends another runner back to Athens to alert them. Then he assembles his troops for a forced night march back to the city. It's hard to imagine how tired these infantry guys are at this point, but if they hope to save Athens, they have to keep going.
The Athenians march all night long.
It's difficult to know how long it would take the Persian ships to sail to Athens from Marathon, a distance of about 62 miles by sea. While a ship of that day could make the trip in about 10 hours, a lot would depend on the currents, weather condition, weight that the ship was carrying. Also, it's possible that some of the ships with the cavalry might have already sailed for Athens a day or so before. So Miltiades can't be sure if he had won the battle and lost the war.
Early the next morning, the Persian commander Datis enters the Athenian harbor with his 600 ships. On the walls of the city, he sees Miltiades and the entire Athenian army.
Datis takes one look at this, understands the difficulties involved of carrying out an opposed amphibious landing, decides better of it, turns to the coxswain, turn the boat around. The fleet turns around and sails back to Persia. And Athens remains free.
As the Persians sail away, the Athenian infantry can finally celebrate their amazing victory at Marathon. To commemorate the victory, the Athenians build one of the most iconic buildings in human history, the Parthenon, a massive temple to the goddess Athena. Carved into the wall of the Parthenon are 192 figures, one for each of the Athenians slain at Marathon. After the defeat at Marathon, Datis returns to the court of King Darius. Some suggest he's executed for his failure. And while there's no evidence for this, history never hears from Datis again.
But what we do know is that Darius was furious. Furious because this pygmy little barbaric state has insulted the great empire of Persia yet again and got away with it. Darius swears in his mind that if he lives long enough, he will have his revenge on the Athenians. As it turns out, of course, he doesn't live long enough.
Persian revenge for Marathon falls to Darius' son, Xerxes, who 40 years after Marathon personally travels to Greece to fulfill his father's wishes.
This transmission of the desire for revenge against Athens sets up, 40 years later, one of the signature battles of Western military history, the last stand of the 300 at the pass of Thermopylae.
At Thermopylae, the great Spartan commander Leonidas uses the same tactics against the Persians that Miltiades did nearly half a century earlier at Marathon.
Marathon itself is one of those moments that is defining in Western history. In fact, it defines what it is to be Western and Greek over against Persian and Eastern. It's not the end of the story. In fact, it's just the beginning of the story.
The Battle of Marathon tells the ancient world that Persia isn't invincible. It serves as a battle cry for future rebellions throughout the empire. Greece and Persia will continue to clash on and off for the next 100 years. The struggle catapults Greece from obscurity into the center stage of the ancient world. It all begins on the blood-soaked plain of Marathon.